Hi, and welcome to Spiritual Book Club. Today we're going to talk about The Soul of Money by Lynne Twist. So I came to this book as I'm shifting from working jobs that are salaries to running my own business, and just feeling like there was maybe some mindset issue in there that was making it harder for me to monetize my own abilities and talents as a self-employed person, and getting curious about learning more about how mindset around money shifts our actions, which of course shifts the outcomes that we get. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the main thesis of this book, some of the big highlights that I learned from it, and I'll share some of my favorite quotes. I'll talk about who I think will read it and benefit most from it, and I would love to know in the comments if you decide to read it yourself. And I'll also talk about one of my favorite things is to say where it falls on the woo-woo scale, so to get a sense of that, as the books that I recommend are spiritual in some sense, but have a range from the personal development to the very woo-woo. So let's get into it. So, and my name's Danny Fankhauser, and I'm a meditation teacher and writer. So I read a lot of books, and I love doing these videos because it gives me a chance to share what I'm learning and help to demystify the mystical. Now let's get into it. So I've seen this book recommended by coaches, other meditation teachers, and, because of the title, The Soul of Money, and also because, I saw someone in like an Akashic Records reading live session who had this book on her bookshelf, and I kind of saw, it's a great book cover design. Like it's very captivating and very simple at the same time. The title, The Soul of Money, sounds very spiritual. So I think what I expected was that it was going to be like a very woo-woo kind of money is energy. The more that you spend money, the more that you make money, and money likes to be free. Like I've heard a lot of these things from different people in spiritual circles, and so I thought it was going to be more like that. It actually was not. So she does describe, if you think of the word currency and how currency relates to electricity, she does say money is, a current. She also describes it compared to water, so the way that water flows. So she does say that money carries intentions, that, she's a fundraiser, so money that was donated to a good cause out of guilt versus money that was donated out of love, that the money donated out of love will have more impact than the other money. So she's definitely, describing money as a carrier of intention, but she doesn't really get into the underlying mechanism behind that, which is something I'm definitely interested in. I've done trainings in energy healing, and so if you are looking for something like that, the book that I would recommend is Power versus Force by David Hawkins, where he definitely gets into like why, doing the same thing out of love versus doing the same thing out of fear, why you seem like you're sending the exact same email, but one email gets more responses and more enthusiasm versus the other. I think he does a good description of why that is. So she's definitely making that same differentiator between the emotion behind the money, but she's not going into kind of the woo-woo sense of it. So it is very grounded, and I would say it's really more of like a narrative nonfiction book in the sense where she's definitely giving advice, but it's not so much self-help as I expected either. She's telling a lot of her personal story, and she worked as a fundraiser for various nonprofits for many years, and lived a very interesting life. And so that was something that I found really fascinating to get to learn about, the kind of people that she met in her lifetime. Buckminster Fuller, which I'll mention a little bit later. She also met Mother Teresa. So you get to hear her experiences, globally. And really where her perspective comes from is that she worked with the very, very poor, and she also interacted with the very, very wealthy. So she really has a full span, and she also, interacted with people in the middle there. But it's sort of like, if you're going to listen to someone about money, here's someone who has, collected experiences and heard stories from every range. And it can be easy for someone to say, like, here's how you manifest money, and but they grew up in an affluent area, they had a lot of privilege, and they have a very specific experience. So if you're looking for someone with a lot more context, that's really what she brings. So the main thesis of this book, I think what most people take away from it is that she really talks about the myth of scarcity. That is really what she presents as her thesis. She talks about three myths. That there's not enough for everyone, that more is better, and that it's always going to be that way, or things won't change. Those are her three myths, and it's a great foundation for sure. I think she talks about musical chairs, the game that a lot of us played at parties growing up, and how the concept of that game is that there's not going to be enough chairs for everyone, and how that kind of sears into our consciousness that we have to fight for the places because there's not enough. And so she really goes into detail about how that's just a belief, and that's quite literally not true. There's quite literally enough food for everyone in the world. But because on a mass scale we believe that there's not enough, or we fear that we're going to be the ones left out, and that we fight to get more and more and more, because we're living that way, that's why there's not enough. That's why everyone doesn't have what they need, essentially. So that's very, very sobering. And mainly, I would say that's mainly her main thesis, but in terms of the advice that she gives, another common thread to go through the whole book is really about looking at your inner resources. So rather than looking at your situation, or falling into that fear of scarcity, or fear things are just going to get worse and worse, but shifting your attention to inner resources, and then that brings those outer resources. So the phrase is, what you appreciate appreciates. Of course, like pretty much every spiritual system, every form of self-help talks about gratitude as, a key, and it's a reflection of that. I feel like the more you read these kinds of books and the more you do personal work, you just come back to the same things, but from a different angle. And so she's really talking about how, she'll describe someone who's going through a divorce, they haven't had a job, they have kids, they have to, care for them, and how rather than looking at the fearful situation and what could happen, really looking at, okay, what are my skills? What do I have? Not in necessarily a monetary sense, but, am I resilient? Am I kind? Do I have strong relationships? And focusing your attention on what you're able to offer. And then from that place, you're able to come up with a better way forward. So shifting the attention to inner resources is, I would say, like her main takeaway in terms of how to have a better mindset around money, and better frame of reference around it. There is a hidden thesis though, which I picked up. So this may be more about me than the book, but I'd be curious what other people find about this, because it's a theme in terms of, she'll tell these stories of, working with people, whether they're the very, very poor in Bangladesh, a middle class, woman in the United States, a very, very wealthy person, and or herself actually. And when she describes giving advice to these people, there's a common denominator in terms of how that conversation goes. And what it is she'll say, imagine yourself as the person who's solved the problem that you're in, and what qualities does that person have, and what do they do? And that jumped out to me because that's something that I'm not sure maybe where I heard it originally, but it's kind of the idea of timelines, and like you want to move on to your highest timeline. Okay, well, what is the person who has what I want to have? What kind of person are they, and how can I be that person now? So I found that really interesting that she calls it a visioning exercise, and she's working through her nonprofit work, working with like a very poor community overseas, and it seems like they have absolutely nothing, no resources, no good farming land, and so on. But when they are able to vision themselves as a country and a community that is known for their art, known for their strong values, then from there they're able to come up with a plan that doesn't actually require that much of an investment from outside, but actually once they have that focus, they're able to come together, they're able to clear some land that they can use for farming, they're able to get the permission from the government that they needed and stuff like that. So it's something that definitely applied from every walk of life, to middle class to very poor to very wealthy, that when they're able to envision that person, for herself, she says like, okay, well, I want to make this, I want to raise this amount of money for the Hunger Project, the project that she works on. Who do I have to become to be the person that does this? Do I have to become someone who's resilient, who doesn't respond to rejection, who keeps working at it, who puts the time in? What are those qualities that of the person I need to become in order to do that? And that's something that I've found really powerful, and I've found it very interesting that even though she doesn't necessarily like highlight so much this idea of visioning as a strategy, it definitely was part of the recommendation that she made to multiple people. So I wanted to highlight that in case it's supportive for you. Some other key points. She does describe some stories that are very difficult, I found difficult to read. The more that I've meditated, the more that I've opened up my own intuition, the more sensitive I've become to vivid imagery of violence, music, movies, and so on, the more sensitive I've become. And so even in a book, and it's not like gratuitous violence, she's literally describing situations that people have. So it's done in the best intentions, but just highlighting that, I found some sections difficult to read. That's something to keep in mind if you are like me and sensitive to that kind of thing. Another cool little thing that's in there is there's this indigenous prophecy, and I'm sure she's not the only person to write about it. I'm sure it's been written about elsewhere, but basically it's this idea that the intellect and the wisdom will come back together, and they will both need each other to survive. And the way that this indigenous group describes it is like, kind of modern Western thought. If you think of like modern and Western science and medical and everything being the intellect. So like there's been all this progress made, but losing kind of a sense of like deeper wisdom, deeper connection with the earth. Whereas the indigenous groups, the ones that have survived, have maintained that deeper wisdom. And so this prophecy is saying that neither will be able to survive on their own, and they'll need to come back together. It's very, very cool to kind of bring that perspective into the way that she's talking about, where we are in terms of humanity and where we're going. But that was a cool addition that's in there. Another prophecy, though, comes from this guy, Buckminster Fuller. I'm vaguely familiar with him through my energy healing studies. I don't know a lot about him, but she was actually able to meet him and go to some of his. This was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna not know the exact year. But she was seeing him speak in the 70s. That's what it was. So around the 70s, as he's, doing these speaking tours, he said that humanity was at a pivotal time where there is enough for everyone, which he doesn't say that it's the first time it's ever happened, because I'm sure there were many times in earlier cultures of humanity where there was enough for everyone and they had a culture that supported that. But he's basically saying like that there's going to be this shift where we sort of figure that out, and it could come with a lot of upheaval, or it could come more gently, but basically that because of, our modern ways, that we will be able to support everyone and shift from a me versus you to a me and you dynamic. And he said that in the 70s and said it would take about 50 years. So here we are. Perhaps we're in the middle of that shift. I hope so. But definitely, kind of the depth of her experience and getting to hear what a futurist was thinking about 50 years ago, and then seeing how that is coming around, definitely gives you a lot of context into, where we are right now in terms of being a turning point. Okay. She does talk about how, she worked with a lot of very, very poor communities, countries, and she talks about aid, foreign aid, being maybe causing more problems than it solves, people becoming dependent on aid and then losing a sense of their own agency. In some cases, being so dependent on aid that they, this is again where things get kind of graphic, but like mutilating themselves or their children in order to seem more sympathetic and to keep getting that aid. There is a great book I read many years ago called Dead Aid. It actually goes into more how when a wealthier country gives aid to more a struggling country, it actually puts control of that country, becomes more valuable, and then it drives violence essentially. So her perspective really illuminated on the ground how just giving money, and so this goes back to like her what she said, where she talks about this $50,000 check that she turned down. The story is in the book. It was given by a corporation that was basically giving it to her and the project out of guilt, versus like a much smaller amount that was given out of love, and how she felt dirty taking the money and she sent it back. It's a great story, so you have to read the book to get the whole thing. But I mean, I think this could be a manifestation of that, where a very wealthy country gives a lot of money to another country, and with the best intentions and wanting to help, but maybe out of guilt that we have more and they have less, or something like that, and how that can actually just cause the people in that country to feel like they're worthless, their land is worthless, and then they don't have the energy to make changes on their own. Versus a lot of the stories she tells about the work that she did was more focused on going in, doing those visioning exercises, asking the people, what do you think you need? And giving them, and not giving them, but like holding the space for them to have that agency, holding the space for them to offer the solution to their own problems. And she gives some great examples of when, they knew that there was an underwater lake that they just needed to get access to, or, they knew what they could do with the land that they had. And so they were able, with very little outside money or support, to solve their own problems and create something sustainable that they could keep going. So there's a really big difference in terms of what the aid does, and it doesn't matter as much how much money it is, as much as the empowerment that goes with how it's given. So that is like a physical manifestation of this idea that money is a carrier of energy, and given in love versus given in fear makes a difference. Okay. She talks about When we act in ways that honor our highest commitments, when we put money behind those intentions, we become really serious about them. So if you saw my other video about happy money, he talks about when we do work and earn money in a way that is authentic to ourselves, when we spend money in a way that we truly value the things that we're buying, that's happy money. This is a very similar concept when we decide, whether it is a charitable donation, or we're spending money at the farmer's market, or we're buying something that we appreciate. Maybe we're spending more than we wanted to, but we appreciate the craftsmanship of the kitchen table that we're buying. That, in spending that money, it creates an internal shift where we feel that our actions are meaningful in the world. And so that, the outer also changes the internal. She also talks about taking a stand with your money, which is similar. But yeah, she says, you come alive, you're flooded with a sense of purpose, even in the smallest action. A feeling of power and energy opens up. And when you take a stand, money flows to you. So she does talk about some specific examples where someone traveled a great distance to share a difficult situation they had survived. And by telling their story, they were able to gain support for people who wanted to support that cause and help people in similar circumstances. It was true of, the farmers who had this land that, they had this idea, they had gotten this vision, and when they went back to their community with that vision, they have renewed energy. They feel like they see a potential future that they like, and then they tell their neighbors who tell their neighbors, and then word spreads, and then everyone else, who might have otherwise felt stuck, been sitting around, that feeling, you're kind of sitting around and you're like, I feel like nothing I do matters and nothing's going to work. But instead, because of their belief in this vision, all of these other people get on board. They have a bunch of people who are going to help clear the plants out to, get the land ready for farming. And then it becomes a reality because they've gotten so many people on board. So she does give these very specific examples from every walk of life of how when you take a stand for something, when you believe in something, when you see a future that you really want, that when you're able to share that, whether it's putting your money behind it or speaking openly about it, that then you're able, the support just kind of comes to you, the resources, the people that are going to help you, and so on. So now I'm going to share some of my favorite quotes from the book. So she says, survivors of divorce or other personal and financial disasters who have gone on to build thriving lives often tell me that their turning point came when they were able to shift their attention and their conversations away from the hurt and loss of the moment and begin to focus on their inner resources and talk seriously about the possibilities. So this theme, it's really coming back to it over and over again. You'll get a sense of that if you read the book. That it just time and time again comes back to this idea of not looking at like the hopelessness that you might feel faced with, but instead going to the inner resources and then thinking about, I love how she says the possibilities, because when you focus your mind on, my community is going to be known for our art and our community support of each other, then you start to see what actions can lead to those things. And that's a really consistent theme through the book, coming back to what are the inner resources and then what can those create. Another quote, once they had focused their attention on their own unlimited inner resources, the outer resources materialized, suddenly accessible. They could begin to see that what they had needed had been there all along. So again, so many stories, both when she, through the Hunger Project worked with like a very poor community, or, even if it was someone, a friend or someone like that was based in the US, that once, it's like once you have that clarity and you know what it is that you need, then you're able to recognize the resources that are right in front of you. It might be a person you already know that you just need their advice. You don't even need money. It might be you need some kind of tool, but it's something you can borrow from a friend. So it comes down to that shift in mindset, opens up the pathway, and you start to see how you can use those resources to make a change. And I also love how she says that that's the turning point. If you are facing a big challenge right now and you feel like there's no way out of it, that mindset shift is the turning point. And in her book, she shares lots of stories of people who took impossible circumstances and made something of it. So that's what you can anchor onto. And then finally, she says, when you make a difference with what you have, it expands. And so this comes back to that idea of what you appreciates. So shifting the focus onto those things that are good. What I did after reading this book, and what I would recommend for you as well, is making a list. And my list of inner resources, I think initially, the first time I tried to do it, it looked a bit like a resume. It was like, I have experience doing this, I have experience doing this. But over time, it shifted more to like the types of compliments people give me. Like, you have great energy, you have like that like knack for follow through. Like, if you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. So I definitely, like, over a period of days as I was reading this book, I started to notice more and more things that weren't just objects that I own or specific experiences that I had, like in a job setting, but that were more like qualities about myself that I'm really excited about. And when I focus my attention on the things I like about myself, I'm more willing to get on a video and share, or talk to someone and share openly, like the things that I'm doing professionally and things that I'm excited about that maybe haven't happened yet, but that I'm working towards. So there's just a lot more confidence that comes from that. So in terms of where this book falls on the woo-woo scale, I would say, I don't know, I feel like maybe it's like a 4 out of 10 if 10 is like super woo-woo and 1 is like not at all, because she talks about living soulfully. Like, she's not talking about religion, she's not talking about spirituality, never mentions the law of attraction, anything like that. But she does talk about how there's kind of, meaning when we make these soulful commitments. And so it's really, again, not about any kind of spirituality, but just acting in ways that are deeply meaningful to us, that are maybe beyond even, of course, there's like the ethics of doing the right thing, but it's deeper than that. It's stuff that's like deeply meaningful, which, you definitely don't need to be spiritual in any way to have those deeper beliefs and commitments. But that's how you find meaning in life, is when you put your actions and your money towards those things that are deeply meaningful to you. And she is saying that when you do that consistently, that money flows to you, which I think this was also in Happy Money, the other book that I recently reviewed. When you do work that you believe, it makes the world a better place, you do have a lot of an easier time getting promotions, convincing people to buy the service or the product, things like that. So it is very logical, but sometimes it's supportive to think about it in a mystical way. And I definitely like to add that sense of mysticism. And I definitely find that when I spend money in that more soulful way, maybe I sign up for like a coaching program or something like that, that's something that is seemingly unrelated. Someone hires me for a project that doesn't seem like logically they would know about each other, but there was an internal change in me, and that seemed to attract that money in a different way. So, who this book is for? Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think, but I think it's one of those books that's maybe more about the right time for it. So I think you get to a level of frustration with how you're making money and feeling like, there's some invisible wall that you're up against. I would say that's kind of something I've felt at different times, but when you feel like from a strategic sense that you have the skills, you have the talent, but that you don't feel like the proper amount of money is coming to you. Or the other side of it is that, the spending maybe feels like that's something that you can't control, or it doesn't seem like you should be spending as much as you are, but somehow you are. I think when you're ready to get kind of honest about that. But also, I mean, to go back to what I said in the beginning, I feel like this was less of a self-help book than what I expected. I think there are maybe a lot of other books about money that are more focused on working through your own history with money, your own patterns with money. This was definitely more kind of big picture. So I think anyone who does work like in your community, or maybe on a global scale, who's just interested in the future and in the shift of collective beliefs, and maybe the future of humanity, and wanting to kind of take a zoom out, because this is not, it's been reissued recently in the past few years, but it's not a new book. So people will talk about how like we're going through such like a crazy time right now, and she says that, but she wrote it like many years ago. So I think it gives you some good context on global events, on what humanity was learning in the 70s, in the 90s, and now in the 2020s, I guess. So I think anyone interested in maybe a more global perspective on financial things. So if you decide to read it, I would love to know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. You'll also find in the description a link to my book lists. There's affiliate links to those, so definitely check them out on bookshop.org, and I will be back soon with another video, so be sure to subscribe to see what I'm reading next. All right, bye.